This morning we are continuing the series from the book of Exodus, and we've titled this series as Redemption from Slavery. And we're looking at it kind of just bigger episodes that are happening. And so this morning we are in chapter 3. And today's passage is a classic text as to how somebody encounters God. Right? And this is a fantastic text where we can learn about what it looks like when you're kind of having an encounter with God. And I've titled this sermon, God Who Calls. A God Who Calls. And we're going to be looking at how He calls, who He calls, and why He calls. And we're going to just try and answer these questions from this passage. Now, as I was preparing, one of the kind of the scenes that came to mind was from the movie The Lord of the Rings, right? And when Frodo is just kind of going about his life, he is kind of living his kind of hobbit life in a shire with simple pleasures, kind of doing his mischief with his friends, not seeking any adventure or greatness. He doesn't have any dream of any battle or glory. He's kind of living his life. And suddenly, at one night, Gandalf comes and appears, right? And Gandalf comes, it's mysterious, it's kind of a puzzling kind of experience, it's unexpected, and Gandalf shows up and calls Frodo and sends him on a mission. Fantastic, right? And I hope a lot of times we feel like, man, this is very clear. Gandalf coming and calling Frodo, and at some point Frodo is like, this is what he says, I wish the ring had never come to me, but yet he's going on this amazing mission and all that stuff. But in life, that's not how encounters with God happens. I wish it was as simple and as vivid and as clear and it's audible and all of that. But it doesn't happen like that, right? And yet there are moments, and even as we go through this passage, and I hope you're able to kind of correlate with your own life, yet there are moments in life where you know God was there. God was speaking to you. Now, from this passage, we're going to see when is that? How can we kind of make sense of those moments, right? So, how God, the God who calls, the God who speaks, the God who is calling us to something, right? So, firstly, I want to talk about who God calls. Who God calls, right? Look at verse 1. Verse 1. Now, Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. And he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb. Now, Horeb is also called Mount Sinai later, right? And just to kind of understand what's happening here. So he came to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he said, here I am. Right? Who God calls. And I want us to kind of think of this context here. Moses was in a place in his life where God miraculously protected him. Right, and put him in a palace, and he is in a place where he is raised as an aristocrat. He's royalty. He's the prince in the Pharaoh's palace. Highly educated, highly trained, great influence, great power. Josephus, the historian, points out. He says maybe Moses was groomed to be the next Pharaoh in Egypt. He had that kind of a power. And yet he finds himself, after 40 years, he finds himself for the next 40 years going through a complete reversal in his life. A complete reversal. It is complete opposite, where you need to understand the one thing that the Egyptians, and we see this in scripture, the one thing the Egyptians hated the most, they detested the most, you know what that was? Shepherds. They just hated when the 70 shepherds, the Hebrews come. Joseph, during that time in Genesis, says, no, the Egyptians won't worry too much about you. They won't be threatened by you. Why? You guys are shepherds. They hate shepherds. They just look down on shepherds. Shepherds are abominable in the sights of Egyptian, right? And here is Moses, trained to be a Pharaoh, finds himself for 40 years in a place where he is a shepherd. Completely forgotten, completely abandoned. worthless. Everything he is trained not to be like, everything he is trained to hate, he becomes that. Right? I want you to think about this, right? I want you to just put yourself in the shoes of Moses. And I'm sure Moses, for 40 years, even as he's tending the sheep of his father-in-law, and he's going into the wilderness and kind of just grazing the sheep and out in the wild all alone, every day, just think about it. I am sure he's thinking of himself as a failure. He just cannot miss it. He's probably replaying what happened in his life again and again and again. He's probably thinking, I wish I didn't do this. I wish I could have done something different. He's probably looking at the sheep and the wilderness, and he's probably full of regret. Because he understands, man, I just made a horrible decision, and now he is completely in the obscure. Maybe there is a lot of regret, and that maybe there are moments and seasons in those 40 years where he's not able to shake it off. He's not able to shake off the guilt. The guilt of killing another Egyptian. And maybe he's getting sleepless nights, and he's getting sweat on his brow, and he wakes up with a shriek thinking of the guilt that is eating him inside. Maybe there are moments where he is filled with shame. He's thinking, man, what? I just messed it up. I've let down my family. I've let down my people. I have just been a disappointment. And that's probably every time he's haunted by the memories of his past, there is shame just washing over him. Just shame covering him. And if he was like any of us, maybe all of this is kind of just coming out as anger. He's probably angry. He's angry with himself. What an idiot I was. He's just angry. And I wanted to think about this. Moses was a man full of confidence. When you read the original chapters, he goes and he's like, man, I think I'm the deliverer here. Thank you very much. That's the way, full of confidence, right? Some of us are able to kind of relate to that, right? We're like a little overconfident in life sometimes, right? Full of confidence. He's like, well, I'm the answer to your prayer right here, right? Full of confidence. In fact, when he's writing, Moses is the one who's writing his biography, his own biography, right? And he thinks about his childhood. He's like, hey, when I was a little child, they called me beautiful child, right? Very good estimation of himself. He's like, well, I was a beautiful child, just by the side, right? If you want to describe one word for me, well, I was so full of beauty, right? And yet he finds himself for 40 years stripped of all confidence. Oh, stripped. Sorry. Stripped of. Think of this. Can you feel it? Like, can you feel? A man who is raised in a certain way, now absolutely no confidence. He is kind of stammering. When he's talking to God, he's stammering. He doesn't even have confidence. You're going to see it later. He doesn't even have confidence to face people. He is full of fear. He is hesitant. He doesn't know what is happening in his life. His life has taken a detour into obscurity. He has no idea where he is, what he's doing. He's just wandering. And yet, God comes after him. And God calls him. I want us to understand who God calls. In Scripture, the God of the Bible specializes in calling those who are forgotten, those who feel they are forgotten. God specializes in calling those who feel worthless. God specializes in calling those who feel like they've been abandoned. Those who feel like they are nothing and insignificant in this world. And maybe that is what you're feeling, even in your own life. Maybe you're finding yourself in a season of wilderness and you're feeling like, Ranjit, my life there's nothing impressive about my life. I'm unattractive. I'm mostly unhealthy. my life, there's nothing appealing about it. There's nothing remarkable about my life. Maybe you are able to kind of feel about some of the passages in Scripture where it's talking about Nazareth, and the thing about Nazareth is they are saying, well, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And you're feeling like, you know what, I can sense that. I feel like my life is like that. Can anything good come out of my life? Maybe you feel like Bethlehem, the least of the clans, ordinary, insignificant, unremarkable. Maybe you feel like the bruised reed or the smoldering wick that is about to lose its flame. You feel like, Ranjit, I am at a place in my life where I don't have energy. I don't have any faith. I know God. I love God. I trust God. But there is no hope. There is nothing exciting. I don't have the energy to do anything in life. You feel spent and beaten down. And yet God calls. Scripture says in 1 Corinthians 1:27, God chooses the foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. Maybe you feel you're at the weakest moment of your life. And yet God says, no, I'm not done with you. I'm just beginning. Verse 28 in 1 Corinthians says, God chooses what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human might boast in the presence of God. No, God specializes in coming after. You know why? Because his heart is near the brokenhearted. His heart longs to be near those who are struggling and those who are oppressed and those who feel abandoned. This is why Jesus came in that kind of a form where he didn't have any place to lay his head. He was forgotten. He was ridiculed. He was oppressed, and he was brutally, violently killed because he understands your pain. God specializes in that. This is why God shows his mercy to Adam and Eve. Oh, Adam and Eve just dropped the ball. They just dropped it. And yet God shows mercy. God calls Abraham a man full of doubts. He's laughing. He doesn't understand. And yet God calls Abraham. God calls Jacob. He is known as a deceiver. Everywhere he goes, people laugh at him because of his name. Why? Because they know. They've already made up their minds about who he is. He is a deceiver. And yet God calls Jacob. God calls Joseph. All his life he grows up hated by people. Hated by his own brothers. Hated, ridiculed, pushed away, looked down. And yet God calls Joseph. God calls Gideon, who is a coward. He's a coward. He's actually threshing the wheat in a wine press. The wine press is kind of under the ground. You should be threshing in the open, but he's afraid of the Midianites. So he's kind of afraid, and he's underground trying to thresh wheat there. And yet God comes and calls Gideon. God calls Rahab, who's a prostitute, carrying a shame in her life. God calls Ruth, a foreign Moabitess who nobody cares about. God calls Jonah, who's a reluctant prophet. God calls David, who is called least among the brothers, the least impressive among his brothers. God calls Peter, who is the most impulsive among the disciples. God calls Matthew, who's the most hated among the tax collectors. God calls Paul, who's a murderous persecutor. And today God calls you and me. Who God calls? No, God is not after the impressive. God is not after the talents and the gifts, and God is not after your accomplishments. No, God understands, and God calls out of his grace. It is purely out of his grace. It's purely out of his grace. And so here he is, Moses. Moses thinks, I'm done. And God shows up and God says, no, I'm not done with you. You're not done. I'm just beginning. Not only who God calls, let's see from this passage how God calls. How does God call? How does this happen? And I want us just to kind of focus on this a little bit and kind of think through this. And I hope you're able to correlate and relate with your own life, right? Verse 2, look at verse 2. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush, he looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And I want us to pause here. Think about this. Moses is kind of encountering kind of a strange moment in his life. A moment where it is not making sense for him. He understands how the world works. He understands how bushes burn. I mean, he's been in the desert for 40 years. He understands how wildfires start. He knows all of these things. And yet he's coming to a moment where he's like, this is not making sense. I understand how the bush burns. I can see the burning bushes here and there. No, this is not making sense to me. Right? I want you to think about this. See, Moses, I want you to just step back and think. Moses, and of course, he has a role to play because of where he is at. I mean, he was impulsive. He murdered the Egyptian. He ran away, and yet he was trying to be faithful to God. All of those things, it's all kind of messed up in his life, right? And yet, all of those moments, he's probably thinking, all my decisions have brought me to this wilderness. And yet, God is providentially working through all of these things. All of these things. And God is actually bringing him to this exact moment where he is able to encounter him at the burning bush. Nothing is off limits for God. Right? And so he comes and he encounters this burning bush. And I want us to slowly kind of take a step back and really understand what these moments are. A burning bush experience is like a spiritual metaphor for an encounter with God when God calls us. And oftentimes, and sometimes we think the burning bush experiences are all these whatever miraculous, it's a vision or this and that. And it is possible, right? We are waiting for the retreat to come, and so then retreat, God will speak to us. And so we are waiting for this mountain or this valley or the beach or wherever that is. No, it can, it's possible. But no, those are not the moments. God oftentimes speaks not apart, but in the very midst of your day-to-day life experiences. You don't need to have a retreat. You don't need to have all these No. God is trying to speak to you in your day-to-day moments. It is in the day-to-day tending of the sheep. He's taking the father-in-law's sheep. He's going to the side of the wilderness. It is his daily activity. And yet, those are the moments where God is speaking to us. Those are the moments God is calling us. What is this burning bush experience? These are circumstances in life. Sometimes there are circumstances in life which doesn't make sense to you. It doesn't make sense. You feel like, you know what, Ranjit, I'm doing everything I can. I am trying to do my best here. I feel like I've made the right decisions here. I think I'm trying my best. There's nothing. I'm putting in my effort. I am making the right decisions. I've talked to people I need to talk to. But what's happening in my life at this moment, it doesn't make sense at all. There is no rational explanation for this. There is no reason for some of these things. I don't understand. I don't understand why these things are happening in my life. I don't understand why these things keep happening again and again and again in my life. I have no idea. There is no explanation here. It is that kind of a moment for him. He's looking at the burning bush. He's like, wait a minute. I don't understand this. I can't explain this. And it is those moments where God is trying to get your attention. Sometimes these experiences could be positive. They're sometimes called the consolation experiences. Meaning, you feel the power of God in your life. You feel just the blessing of God. You feel like God is just orchestrating things, right? Have you been in moments where maybe you're looking for a job and you're like, man, I didn't even see the alarm. I just slept through it and I don't know how I got this job. I have no idea how I got the job. I don't know how I made it. I don't know what's going on. There are times you look back and you feel like, man, this is like a dream. This is like a dream. I have no idea how all these things worked out, right? And you're able to look back and see, no. God was there. God was there. God was orchestrating. You could kind of sense in your heart and your spirit, no, this was God, right? So there are moments like that. There are moments of consolation, moments of abundance, moments of excess, moments where you feel close to God and you're able to understand, no, God is doing something. And yes, there are moments like that, but oftentimes there are also moments of desolation, moments of suffering, moments of trial, moments of pain, moments of grief and dryness and emptiness. And those are equally moments where God is trying to get your attention. And these are moments you feel like, Ranjit, I don't understand. I don't understand why my prayer is not answered. I don't understand. I don't understand why things are not working out. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. I don't understand this. Why? I can't make sense of my life right now. And that could be those burning bush moments. Where God is saying, hey, your life is not making sense? Come, take a look at me. I'm trying to get your attention. I'm trying to get your attention. Moses is at a strange moment. Things don't make sense for him. And God is trying to get his attention. And another thing you see here, and it's a very interesting thing. God is actually waiting for Moses to turn and look. Right? God is in the burning bush. It is only when he turned, he looked, he paused, he stops, he looks, and he beholds what's happening. It is only that moment, where the moment God sees, well, he's turning and he's looking, and then God begins to talk to him. And so here it is. I want you to understand there are these moments in life when God is trying to get our attention. Things are not making sense. Things are not making sense. It doesn't make any logical sense in your life. But there are moments where, we are just. It could be you are in seasons like that, even maybe right now, but you go through those moments just angry. You're just angry. Or maybe you're going through those moments in life just grumbling, right? Just murmuring and complaining, just bitter. And so you're looking at the burning bush and you're like, man, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. I don't have time. You're just sitting and just playing things in your head again and again. Why God doesn't care about God? Where is God? Why is he not? Right? Look at what they did to me. You're just seeped in your hurt. You're just seeped in your anger, and you're just holding that and completely missing some of these moments where God is trying to get your attention. If you are anything like me, this is what I completely oblivious sometimes to what God is doing. Why? Because I'm living in my own world. I'm just full of my own anger and full of my own bitterness. Sometimes we miss it. Some of us feel like, okay, we need to just, I have no time for this. I have no time to process anything. I don't want to talk about my heart. I don't want to think about all these things. No, I'm just going to work. I'm just going to put my head down. I'm just going to work. And you're just busy, just working. No time. Just busy. You're trying to crowd your life and your heart with busyness, and God is trying to get your attention here. You tracking me? And you're wondering, why is God not talking to me? Why am I not able to say, why is this? What's happening? It doesn't make sense. But I'm not able to sense what God is doing. Why? No, because maybe there is something that we are like just preoccupied with our own bitterness, with our own anger, with our own frustration, with our own grumbling, with our own busyness, with our own things. Like Mary and Martha, just busy, just working, and not willing to come and see what God is doing. So how does God call? Moses turns aside. He sees the burning bush and he's like, it doesn't make sense. So he turns aside and he looks and he beholds. And God speaks to him from the burning bush, and God says, Moses, take off your sandals. I love it. I know we like the moment like this, right? But let me tell you, one of the things that's happening is very interesting. God is trying to tell Moses, stop running. Take off your shoes. You know what's the best way to run in a wilderness is with your shoes. You can't be running anywhere without your shoes. God is, hey, no, I know you want to run away from here. Take off your shoes. Wait here for some time. Wait here. I'm going to talk to you. Wait here. This is holy ground. This is a holy moment. Don't get too busy. Don't be distracted. Forget about the sheep. The sheep will be fine, right? Just, just wait. Take your shoes off. Wait here for me. And maybe that is the call for you today. Some of us, God is saying, hey, I know you. I know you are wonderful. Oh, I know you're so wonderful. You're so wonderful, right? No, no, no. Take off your shoes. Take off your shoes. Wait. Wait. Submit here. Submit. Submit to me. How does God call? God calls through the burning bush experiences. I'm going to just give you a couple of examples from my life just to help you so that you're able to correlate this. If you're wondering if it's too abstract, let me tell you. See, when you go through a burning bush experience, you're able to understand what's happening here. I mean, when you go, you will never forget it. You will never forget it. There are moments in your life, and I'm sure you understand this. There are moments in your life, you're looking back at your life and you're like, I can't explain this. I can't explain. It was God. That's the only explanation here, right? For me, there are moments like that. Like when I was in Auburn, studying in the U.S., when I was single, first in my family, took the boat and went to the U.S. and the American dream and all that stuff. And so, I mean, some people actually thought I left the U.S. because I kind of didn't fit in. I didn't like the U.S. I was like missing home. I'm like, no. I liked it too much. I loved the US. I loved everything, right? I loved that I was away from home for one, and then I had the money, and I had friends, and I just enjoyed. It was those 2 years for me. I loved everything about it. It was like a dream for me because God just worked it out. God just broke things. He just broke doors. I was not the guy who will get scholarship, and I'm not like this academic guy. Somehow God just opened doors, and God just made a way. I can just sense His power. I can sense Him working. Every day was a dream. If I can tell some of the stories that happened, it was just like a dream for me, right? I knew it was a moment of excess and abundance and just joy and friendship. It was a dream, right? And yet those are the moments where God called me to ministry. Those are the moments, those 2 years. I remember I used to go to this particular park. I mean, maybe you can relate to this. There was this overwhelming joy in my life. I just loved it. I was just living my life, right? And I would go to this park, a beautiful kind of bridge, like a little pond. There'll be a bench. It's a botanical garden very close to where I was staying. I'll open the Bible. Nobody was there. I would sing, right? You don't want to hear me sing, but I would sing this loudly. I would sing this song, "As the deer pants for the waters, my soul longs for you." I would just sing, right? Those are the 2 years. God said, "Ranjit, you love what you're doing. You love all this. You're enjoying all this. Wonderful. You enjoy all of these wonderful things. I'm going to call you to India. I want you to leave that. Come back." Right? I know for me, man, I met God. But there were also moments in my life, and I talked about this a lot, right? See, when you encounter a burning bush, you're not going to forget it. It's going to come up in all the sermon illustrations, right? There are moments. Dallas was a burning bush for us. Dallas was a moment like that, and Dallas was difficult. It was difficult. Oh, man. I had to go to counseling after 20 years. I had to go to counseling and think about my Dallas time. It was not easy at all, right? It was not easy. And I told my first service, I said, there are things that if I say it'll make you uncomfortable, but I'm gonna make you uncomfortable, right? I mean, there are moments. I was like this person who said, I'm not going to think about it. There is no time to think about my heart. There's no time. In those 4 years, I did not cry. I told myself, I am not going to cry. Right? My wife's in the hospital. I have a baby. I have to go to work. I have to take care of the Sanjana as a 6-month-old. I mean, I cannot just skip classes. I mean, it was an intense time, right? And I said, I'm not going to cry. There's no time for crying here, right? But I remember it will show up. My emotions will show up in just random places. right? And twice it happened. It just, it was not good. Twice it happened. One somebody called me, some random, right? Mr. Rando. Rando is calling me on the phone, and I'm like, and suddenly they're like, how are you? And I'm just bawling on the phone, and that person is so comfortable. They're like, no, I'm not. Sorry, I'm not your dad. I can't take care of you. Why don't we talk later, right? Let's just cut the call here, right? No, because that's not. It would just come in random places. And the second time it happened, I was with the theology professor, right? I remember the eschatology, Glenn Kreider. I'm going in to submit my assignment, and I had to talk to him about something. And he's like, okay, how are things going? And I just bawl. I couldn't contain. It'll just come in random places. And my theology professor is like, maybe you should meet a counselor. You go somewhere else, right? This is a teacher-student kind of an encounter, interaction here. It was a tough moment. It was tough. See, in some context, I understand, because when I look back, I know what God was doing. I know what He was doing. See, because I like to plan things a little bit. It's not a bad thing, right? I like to put an Excel sheet. So everything I put it in Excel, right? Especially I like to plan my future. I like to plan my finances. I like to plan. So I will put the expense, I'll put the income, all this stuff, and then every month it'll glow. It'll glow either red or green, right? The Excel, you can actually do the macros and it can actually tell you, right? So every time at the end of the month, if I see a green, I'm like, man, Ranjit, you're the amazing person. You're saving money. See, we didn't have a lot of money. We are students there, right? We didn't have a lot but it'll be like a security for me. And I was like, man, I'm trying to take care of things here. I'm trying to take care of my family and all of those things. And my identity and my security was so built on all these Excel sheets. It was just to the dot. Every cent, every dollar, it was there, right? God had to take me to a place where He said, Ranjit, you think you are running this family? You think it's your Excel sheet, right? Your strategy, right? You think? No. He had to take me to a point of the lowest of the low in my life. And He said, Ranjit, none of your Excel sheets is going to work in this place. None of your strategy, none of your plans, none of your nice little things, ideas, nothing. I'm going to take you to a place where everything is going to be stripped of you. It was a tough moment. I mean, we were in debt. We were in a medical debt for more than 1 crore. I had no idea how I'm going to pay. I was having sleepless nights. I just didn't know what. They're going to kick me out? What is going to happen? Am I going to make it out of this place? I had no idea whether Deepa's going to live. How am I going to take care of my kid? I had no idea whether I'm going to graduate. I was at the lowest moment. And yet, when I look back, that was a burning bush. You know why? Because that is where God said, Ranjit, now you understand how life works? Now you understand? Now you understand what you're capable of? Well, now you go to Delhi. You go to Delhi. Don't take your Excel sheet and all this stuff. You go because I am calling you. Your life is not going to work because you are amazing. It is going to work because I am with you. And God had to strip me to a place to understand that. Hey, maybe some of you are moments in your life right now where you're like, Ranjit, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand this at all. God is saying, hey, stop. Take off your shoes. Look at me. I'm trying to speak to you. So who God calls, how God calls, through the burning bush. Who God calls the most unlikely people through the most unlikely experiences. And finally, why God calls. Why does He call? Does He call so that you have a nice experience? Like a nice dream and a nice vision, you can keep talking. Why does God call? It is not for a nice experience. It is to send you out on a mission. Right? Let's look at this. Verse 6. Verse 6, and He said, this is what God said. God tells him, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then verse 7, God says, then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of the taskmasters. I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out to a land, to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And then he goes on in verse 10, he says, no, this is what I'm going to do. Now, come, verse 10, come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Moses said, but who am I? Who am I? Who am I? I can't speak. I can't do anything. Who am I? They'll be like, what are you doing here? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He says, but I will be with you. I will be with you. And this shall be a sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Right? This God is saying. This is what every time I'm narrating my burning bush experience, I'm going back and living those moments, and I'm saying, well, God was there. God was there, and God is telling you, why does God call? Why? Is it because you have a nice emotional experience? No, my friends. No, it's not about you. It's not about you enjoying something as a trophy. No, my friend. It is to send you out with a missional mandate. This is why God calls. When you encounter him, he calls you not so that you have a nice experience. He wants to send you into something. That is how God calls. Every time we see when God calls Abraham and he has an encounter with God, God says, now leave and go. When God meets with Jacob and he's wrestling with God, now God says, now go. When God meets Isaiah, he says, now go. When God meets Gideon, he has an encounter. Then God says, go. When God meets Matthew, when Jesus meets him, he says, now follow me to where I'm going. Simon, Andrew, James and John, follow me. When Saul meets an encounter with Jesus, he says, now come, go. Every time you have an encounter with God, it is not for the experience of the encounter. It is to send you out. And God says, no, I have a people. I see the struggles of people. I see the affliction of people. I see the burdens people are having. I see the brokenness and how people are estranged from me. You have an encounter with me? Now go. Go. Go to these people. Go serve me. Go be a burning bush. Hey, this is what's happening. This is what Moses' life is going to be. Moses' life is going to become a burning bush now. His life is going to be a life of contradiction. He's going to meet with Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's going to laugh at him. And yet God is going to do something powerful through this person, through the burning bush. My friend, the same way you'll be like, Ranjit, I feel weak. I feel lost. I feel like I don't have anything. I'm not gifted. I'm not remarkable. There's nothing. I'm insignificant. Yet God says, no, when I am with you, you're going to be this contradiction in this world. Nobody can make sense of what's happening in your life, but I am with you. I am with you. I am in the midst of your life. Your life won't make sense to you. Your life won't make sense to people around you, but I am with you. And you're going to shine like the burning bush as my witness in this world. We see who God calls, we see how he calls and why he calls. My friend, even as we are applying this, and I know you're applying this to your own personal life and you can sense the Spirit of God calling you, but I want you to step back and understand this is not just an encounter with Moses, but God is actually orchestrating something in a larger sense. The burning bush is a picture of the gospel here. You're encountering the gospel here. It's a foreshadow of what God is about to do for all of us. What's happening here? Look at verse 2. Verse 2 it says, and the angel of the Lord appeared to him. Angel of the Lord. And yet it was not consumed. Why was it not consumed? Think of this, right? When a fire is burning, it is the fire basically takes all the objects for fuel and consumes everything around it, and that's how it burns. But here is a fire that doesn't need the bush to burn. Here is a fire that has its own energy, that is self-sustaining, right? That doesn't require other things to be in existence. What is this? What's happening? Fire. It says the angel of the Lord appeared in the flame. Verse 4. Not only the angel of the Lord. It says when the Lord saw that he turned aside, God called him out of the bush. Now, is this an angel? Is this the Lord? Is this God? Verse 6, and it said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And it said, and Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. What's happening here? What's happening here? Now, here is an example where you're encountering what is called a theophany. A theophany, it's a visible manifestation of the invisible God. It's an angelic representation of God himself. It is not a created angel. It is a pre-incarnate second person of the Trinity, the Lord Jesus himself showing up there. I want you to understand, he is encountering Jesus. Why is the bush not burning? Why is the bush not burning? Why? Because Jesus is in the flame. He's the mediator. See, in a few chapters later, you're going to encounter the whole people will come to the same mountain, and the mountain is going to explode, and God is going to tell people, do not come near. Do not come near this mountain. You'll be consumed. God is a holy, consuming fire, and yet the bush is not consumed. And yet Moses is not consumed. How is it possible? How is it possible? Why? The reason is the angel of the Lord is in the fire, mediating. My friend, you're getting a picture of the gospel where Jesus, this angel, is ultimately going to stand in the fire of God's holiness for you and for me. The reason why we can approach God with boldness and be able to call him Abba, Father, and have this intimate relationship with him, though he's a consuming fire, full of holiness and transcendent and apart from us, and yet he draws near to us. How is it possible? It is because of Jesus who is mediating for us. You are encountering Jesus here. Jesus comes as a mediator. He represents God to us. He reveals God to us. And also he stands in the midst of the fire of God's holiness on our behalf. On our behalf. And he ultimately went to the cross where he faced the wrath of God's holiness on our behalf as our substitute, so that now we can be called the children of God. And we encounter this Jesus. And today, Jesus is not only representing who God is and the Father is, no, he is calling each one of you. He's calling you. He's drawing near to you. Not just so that you'll have a nice emotional experience, you'll sing some nice songs and lead your life. No, not for that, my friend. But to send you out on a mission. He is there and he's saying, I'm going to turn you into the burning bush because I will be in your life. You will sometimes experience what 2 Corinthians says. You will be afflicted in every way, and yet not crushed. You will be perplexed, but not driven to despair. You will be persecuted, but not forsaken. You will be struck down, but not destroyed. Always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. You're going to be a mystery. You're going to be an enigma. You're going to be a puzzling situation where people are going to be looking at you. You look weak, and yet you are strong. Oh, you look crushed, but yet you are not in despair. What is happening? What is happening here? You are burning, but you are not consumed. You look poor, but yet you are rich. You are going to be a mystery. Why? You're going to be shining like the burning bush. Why? Because Jesus is in the midst of your life. You are not going to be consumed. You're not going to be consumed. Oh, he is with you. Hey, this morning, I want to encourage you. Maybe you're able to relate a little bit here. And like, Ranjit, I understand. I'm in a situation where my life doesn't make sense at all. I've been praying, I've been seeking God, I've been obeying, I've been doing all these. I don't understand. My life is not making sense to me. God is telling you, hey, stop right there. Take off your shoes. You're on holy ground. I'm trying to talk to you.